Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
This happened in the early 2000s, and I'll need to tell a bit of backstory. I do get to the point eventually, promise. I owned a 94 Saturn SC1 at the time. I loved the car and I even had vanity plates of my favorite band. Anyway, one night I was going to meet a friend at IHOP for some coffee and conversation. It was kind of late, around 9 p.m. when I walked out into the parking lot of my apartment complex. My baby was gone. I immediately called 911 and reported it stolen. I was so shaken. Nothing like that had ever happened to me and I honestly didn't know what to do. My friend made the detour from IHOP and came over to see if there was anything he could do to help. He couldn't. And I was so upset I become an irritable witch, so I asked him to go home. Besides, my brother was staying with me at the time and he was better at providing comfort than a distraction anyway. A couple hours pass and I get a call from a police station about half an hour away. They found my car. I could not believe it. We rushed to the station where we were escorted to a little room. They asked me a ton of questions like, did you loan the car to anyone? No, I didn't. Was it unlocked? No. Did you leave the cars in it? No, someone stole it. Dudes. After about an hour, they finally came in with a complaint for me to sign and led me to the garage, where my car was finished being processed. As we walked, the officer told me I was lucky, very lucky. The person that took my car had stolen 3 other Saturns from my area. The last one he'd taken just before mine, he wrapped it around a stop sign, fled the scene and took my car to get away. He also added that they found my car so quickly because the officer who saw it remembered my license plates from the alert that went out over the radio. Had I not had such distinct plates, the thief may have gotten away and/or totaled my car. I found my car in almost the same condition I'd left it in, except he pulled off the items I had hanging from the rearview mirror, had the nerve to change all of my radio presets, but best of all, he was kind enough to fill my tank with a stolen credit card. Nice little bonus, to be honest. Forward a few weeks and his first court date arrives. I didn't have to go because they weren't sure I'd be called as a witness, but I went anyway. I sat there patiently as they read off the charges. They were numerous. Multiple counts of auto theft, credit card fraud, leaving the scene of an accident and blah blah blah. When they asked how the defendant would plead, his father stood up and whined, "My son has ADHD, he doesn't know what he's doing is wrong. He has no control over his actions. He's innocent." The judge stared at him for a moment, then again asked how the defendant would plead. The kid said, "Not guilty." They set a new trial date and all that. The state prosecutor met me in the hallway and explained that they were going to try to make a deal. There probably wouldn't be a jury trial, but if there was, I'd be contacted. As he walked away, the father approached me. He looked desperate. He asked me to drop the charges because his son was mentally ill. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "No, I won't. Besides, mine isn't the only car he stole." Then turned to leave with him trailing behind me until I got on the elevator. The next letter I received from the courts told me the kid was sentenced to 7 years. P.S. The reason why he stole Saturns is because the older models have a flaw that makes them easy to steal. For obvious reasons, I'm not going to share that detail. Context. This woman has been a problem parent at the center for as long as her 5-year-old child Molly has been there. The girl started as an infant in our baby room, so that's 5 years of this woman. This entitled mother is not a good person. She would not pack lunches for her daughter. She would often send her then 13-year-old to bring Molly into the daycare because she didn't want to. And at least 3 times a week, teachers had to give the child a bath in the sink. And when she was too big for that, a sponge bath because she smelled so bad. Yes, we called Child Protective Services, and I'm not sure what came with that, but I know Molly is still in her custody. It was awful, but there was one saving grace this girl could look to: Jenny. Jenny was the sweetest woman you would ever meet. She worked in one of the preschool classrooms, but her heart was so big and open that she extended her kindness to all children. Every time Molly came in was at lunch, Jenny would make sure she had food, even if it meant driving to the local Walmart or country fair to get her a sandwich. Eventually, Jenny began to bring in food personally for Molly because Molly's mom never packed her lunch. Jenny died suddenly and unexpectedly in 2019. She was young, just barely over 30. This entitled mother kept bringing Molly in without lunches, and up until COVID hit, it was an ongoing battle that finally came to a head yesterday. Molly came in at 10:30 yesterday, which was too late for breakfast. In the preschool classrooms, we keep them on a schedule, and breakfast ends at 8:30. While they get snacks at 10, Molly had a snack and lunch started at noon. When the teacher opened her lunchbox to prepare her food at lunch, she noticed there was breakfast in there. She decided politely to remind Molly's mother that breakfast ends at 8:30. If she was planning to bring her in later, to please have her eat before she comes in, because things are already in full swing in the classroom. This was done via a childcare app that we use to communicate with parents. Well, this entitled mother did not like that and called the center screaming at our assistant director. This lasted for 10 minutes and the pregnant assistant director came into my room, the infant room, angry about all this. She cooled down and went back to her office. The offices are right next to my room, so I was being somewhat nosy and listening in. The mom came to pick Molly up, effectively pulling her from the center. There, she got to shouting at the assistant director. Wouldn't you be upset if they weren't feeding your baby? Wouldn't you want justice and people held accountable? And that's when the director stepped in and told the assistant director to check on the other classrooms. Translation: you don't have to listen to this. I'll handle it. The director then followed up with, personally, I would make sure that my child ate breakfast before bringing her in. The assistant director left at that point. The mother was throwing a fit about how she didn't like the teachers here, how she thought Tiana, the preschool teacher for the 4 or 5-year-olds, was a raging witch, and how she didn't like her since the beginning, and how a lot of the parents pulled their kids because of her. Thing is, she was confusing Tiana with Tessa, the younger preschool teacher for the 3 to 4-year-olds. Tessa is admittedly a strict woman, but her strictness was countered with kindness and positive reinforcement. The mother is so out of touch with her daughter's providers that she never even got to meet Tiana. Finally, she delivered a zinger everyone knew was coming. The hopes she had enough class to refrain from saying, "You stopped doing the food program when Jenny died. I think you're just too selfish and cheap to honor her memory in continuing it." To which the director finally stood up and said, Jenny was a food program. She bought that food for Molly out of her own pocket with her money that she earned caring for the children here. The reason this so-called food program stopped was because Jenny died. To which the entitled mother doubled down and said, "Why wouldn't you continue to buy food for the children in her honor?" "Because we don't have the budget to allocate funds for a food program. And in addition, in our handbook, it states we are only to provide snacks. We would need a whole other set of clearances and regulations to start serving food here like a cafeteria. Why you did it when Jenny was here?" The argument continued back and forth like that until finally, the director basically said that this was a second outburst that this mother had, and that they could no longer accept Molly at the center with this continued behavior. The entitled mother, needing to get the last word in, finished with, "Fine, I don't want to send my child to a place that starves her." Then she left with Molly. The assistant director ended up calling the police because his mother was blowing up our messaging app for our daycare, calling Tiana all sorts of horrible names and talking crazy. Some threats were made towards the assistant director, so Tiana told her, and the assistant director is considering filing a restraining order if things continue to escalate. She threatened to dox the center. Our center's contact information is online, so I don't know if it's a dox, but that's what she basically threatened to do. CPS was contacted. This woman had a record, and I'm pretty sure how the threats she made could get her in a lot of trouble. First up, some backstory. During my gap year between studies, I decided to work for Company N. Company N was run by a husband, Dave, and wife, Karen, was their son, and basically treated their staff like a small family. All was well for about 2 months until I realized I had to ask for a day off since I wanted to attend the last Slayer concert the band would give in my country. There was about a month to go, so I sent an email asking for the day off and explaining why. And this is where everything started to go downhill. I got a reply from the Karen, and her reply was weird. She stated that that's not how asking for a day off works. I was confused to say the least, not sure what to do. I thought she wanted a more formal way of asking, so I wrote a formal email asking for the day off. She shot an email back. I already had to think it through what I was doing, which made even less sense to me. But I was hopeful, since I never really got a specific no. The next workday rolls around. I arrived, locked up my bike, and headed inside ready for work. I immediately started looking for Dave to ask for answers. Before I could even open my mouth, he asked me, "Do you still want to go to that concert?" I didn't expect him to ask this, so quickly answered, "Yes." The only thing he said back was, "Okay, take off your vest and you can go home." I was stunned. And while the words started to sink in, I looked at my colleagues, which were just preparing for opening. When it finally sank in, anger flowed in. I am not a confrontational person, so I simply took off my vest and gave it to Dave. Without a word, I left and started biking home. When I got back home, I told my mother what happened. We started sending emails for extra information and got very Karen-like emails back. After a couple emails which went basically nowhere, I looked up the laws for immediate dismissal. After reading up about it, I learned that in my country, somebody can only be immediately fired when caught stealing, frauding, the person isn't able to do the work, or refusal to do the work. And I did neither of these. A day or two later, I met with my attorney and began the steps to sue Company N. I told my lawyer what happened in detail, and he was very confident I was in my right and she was not. So after trading even more emails between the three of us, we went to small claims. I came prepared in a suit with my attorney in tow, and Karen showed up alone. I guess she assumed she won because she thought she was in her right. The trial began, and I was as professional and objective as I could be. Karen did the same. Well, for about half of the trial. When she realized evidence was piling up against her, she resorted to calling me a spoiled brat, among other things I don't know the English translation for. I am safe to say that was a point the judge ruled in my favor. As per usual, I had to wait a month before I got the verdict black on white in the mail. But I won. It may have taken about 6 months from the moment I was told to go home to the point those 6 months of pay were transferred to my bank account, but it was 100% worth it. In the end, I went to the concert. It was the most awesome and most profitable concert I have ever been to in my life. I've never really posted anything before, but I have a funny revenge/karma story that my friends have always enjoyed. I first got to college my freshman year and met the dorm leader, RA, at most schools. Like most colleges, the dorm leader was the upperclassman that lived in the dorms and monitored the freshman halls. My dorm leader's name was Julio. Fake name, by the way. And at first, he seemed like a nice dude that minded his own business. He talked about how he would stay out of everyone's business if we would stay out of his. Also, he tried to be the cool dorm leader, and always mentioned to me about how he drank tons of alcohol his freshman year in the dorms. He gave off the impression he really did not care if we ever drank in our dorm rooms, but to just keep it on the low if we did. I really didn't drink much at all, but I appreciated the fact he seemed pretty normal and then try to rant on kids. During the last week of October of my freshman year of college, I had one of the hardest weeks of my academic career. I was a biochemistry major, taken some pretty tough classes, and had 3 exams that week. At the end of the week, a friend I had recently made down the hall invited me to his dorm room to watch an upcoming NBA game. As we were watching the game, he had a bottle of vodka and gave some to the guys in the dorm. Being a naive and stupid freshman kid just trying to make some friends, I took 1 shot of vodka and continued to watch the game. As we were watching the game, one of the guys in the dorm spills a bottle of soda and rushes to the bathroom to grab some paper towels. As he walked out of the dorm room, Julio walked by and noticed the bottle of vodka. He laughed and said something of the sort of, "I remember when I was a freshman, haha. Just try and keep it down." We thanked him and told him to have a good night. It seemed like a normal conversation and nothing out of the ordinary. 30 minutes later, we hear a knock on the door and 2 policemen show up with breathalyzers. They told us they had received a complaint from Julio about underage drinking and a party being thrown in a dorm room. Remember, it was 3 guys watching a Lakers game on Thursday night at 8 p.m. I ended up getting a minor in consumption charge for blowing a .02, had to do 20 hours of community service, a reflection journal, and appeared to the Judicial Affairs Center in my college about my supposed drinking problem. I'm not blaming the officer for giving me a ticket, but I was pretty upset that Julio, who always talked about getting crap-faced freshman year in a dorm, called the police right after he essentially gave us the okay for the night. A few weeks later, I saw Julio and straight up asked him why he decided to rat me out. Specifically, I asked why he didn't just tell me to head back to my dorm if he had a problem with the alcohol, instead of calling the police right after our conversation. And he responds word for word with, "He made a decision and had to suffer the consequences of that decision." After that incident, I never really talked to him, but he always tried to be buddy-buddy when he saw me in the hallway. Anyway, I eventually leave the dorms and move off campus for my sophomore year. I had decided to rush fraternity my freshman year and ended up meeting some really nice guys. I have never been the fraternity type, but I went to a smaller college where fraternities are a lot different than most places. During the 2nd semester of my sophomore year, my fraternity was taking a new pledge class. One day, I received a text from Julio saying, "One of the guys pledging your fraternity has been caught dealing alcohol to another freshman in the dorms. I thought I would let you know." Turns out, Julio was a dorm leader for a freshman pledging my fraternity and ratted him out to Judicial Affairs as well. Thinking the term dealing alcohol was the lamest/funniest thing I have ever heard, I sent that to our fraternity group me and everyone laughed about it. About a week later, that kid pledging our fraternity came up to me asking about the message I received from Julio. Essentially, a pretty similar thing happened to him like what happened to me. Julio found out he had given another kid in a dorm a bottle of wine and reported it to the police. This kid ended up getting a minor imposition and had to speak with Judicial Affairs. And this is where the story gets hilarious. In his meeting with Judicial Affairs, the kid pledging our fraternity told the Judicial Affairs guy that his dorm leader, Julio, who was now a senior at this point, had texted me about the charges pending against him. Apparently, it's a huge violation to discuss pending charges against a freshman in your dorm to a third party. The Judicial Affairs guy told him that if he could prove Julio was discussing this charge with a third party, aka me, he would receive severe sanctions. Basically, if I sent that text to the Judicial Affairs people, Julio would be in a crap load of trouble. So I sent that text that night to the Judicial Affairs people. After that, I didn't hear anything about what happened to Julio and had honestly forgotten about it. However, nearing the end of the school year in my sophomore year, I saw Julio at the dining hall and came up to speak to me. He tells me a story about how he knows I was the one who ratted him to Judicial Affairs, how he ended up getting fired from his dorm leader position, lost the scholarship money his dorm leader job provided him, and overall how crappy his life has been since he got fired. After going through his entire sob story, he asked me, Why did you do that? This could have been handled completely. I didn't have to get fired, and I could have kept my scholarship money. I look him dead in the eye for what seemed like 30 seconds and say, Julio, you made a decision and had to suffer the consequences of that decision. My name is Matt, and I live with my family in a suburban neighborhood with a white picket fence that separates my yard from the one owned by my neighbor Dave. Now, don't get me wrong, Dave seemed like a nice enough guy, but little did I know he had an inner entitled beast just waiting to break free. During summer, my family and I decided to go on a much-needed vacation. We packed our bags, locked up the house, and set off for a week of relaxation and fun. Everything seemed hunky-dory, and we were blissfully unaware of the chaos that awaited us back home. Fast forward to the day of our return, we drove into the neighborhood, feeling refreshed from our trip. But as we approached our house, something seemed off. Our once pristine white picket fence was now a mangled mess of broken boards and splinters. Whoa, what happened to our fence? I shouted, completely flabbergasted. My wife Sarah looked out the window and gasped. It looks like a hurricane hit while we were gone. As we pulled into the driveway, we noticed the party happening next door at Dave's house. The music was blaring and people were splashing around in our pool like it was a public water park. What the heck is going on over there? I muttered. I approached Dave, who was lounging in a deck chair with a smug look on his face. Hey Dave, what happened to our fence? And why is there a pool party in our backyard? With an arrogant grin, he replied, Oh, don't worry about the fence. The HOA president, Karen, gave me the green light to take it down for the pool party. She said that it would be a community event and that your yard and pool are community assets in this case. I couldn't believe my ears. Karen, the HOA president, was always shady and annoying, but this was just way out of line. I mean, there were rumors circulating about mismanagement of HOA funds. Several community members questioned the transparency of the financial decisions made by Karen and the HOA board. They were concerned about where the money from their dues was going, and there seemed to be a lack of accountability for how the funds were being used for community improvements. One time, they decided to impose strict guidelines for holiday decorations, including limiting the use of outdoor lighting and disallowing inflatables in animated displays. This decision upset many families who had cherished traditions of creating elaborate displays during the holiday season. Another time, Karen once proposed to remove a community play area, arguing that it was an eyesore and required maintenance costs. However, the majority of families with young children protested, emphasizing the importance of having a safe space for kids to play and socialize. Anyways, I stormed over to Karen, who was sipping a drink and chatting with some of the partygoers. Karen, what on earth possessed you to let Dave destroy my fence and throw a party in my backyard? She looked at me arrogantly and said, Oh Matt, it's all in the name of community spirit. Plus, the HOA was running out of funds for our events, so Dave offered to sponsor this pool party. Isn't that generous of him? I was raging. Generous? It's my property, and I never agreed to any of this. Karen waved me off dismissively. Oh, don't be such a spoilsport. Everyone's having a great time, and it's all for the greater good of the neighborhood. Greater good, my foot. I stormed back to my family, who were watching the spectacle unfold with wide eyes. Sarah put a comforting hand on my shoulder, saying, What are we going to do, Matt? This is insane. I took a deep breath and decided that enough was enough. I pulled out my phone and dialed a non-emergency police line. Hi, there is a neighbor here throwing a party on my property without my permission, and I need some help sorting this out. The dispatcher assured me that an officer would be on their way, and in the meantime I walked up to the DJ, who was blasting music at an ear-shattering volume, and I asked him to turn it down. He gave me a condescending look but complied. A few minutes later, an officer arrived on a scene. I explained the situation and he listened attentively, raising an eyebrow at the audacity of the whole ordeal. Let me have a word with your neighbor and the HOA president, he said, striding over to where they were still holding court. The officer spoke with them for a while, and I could see their smug expression slowly morphing into concern. After what felt like an eternity, the officer walked back to us and said, "Well, it seems like Mr. Dave and Mrs. Karen didn't quite grasp the concept of personal property. I've informed them that they need to clear out immediately and restore your fence." Dave put up a weak argument saying, "But officer, this is a community event. Everyone's having fun." But the officer was having none of it. "That may be, but it's not your property, and he didn't have permission to use it." End of discussion. With the police officers backing, they begrudgingly started tearing down the decorations and gathering up their party supplies. The crowd dispersed, leaving our yard looking like a post-apocalyptic mess. As they cleaned up, Karen gave me a death stare and said, "You regret this, Matt. The HOA won't stand for this disrespect." I simply shrugged. "No, Karen. I will not stand for this disrespect. This will not slide." Once the partygoers had cleared out and our yard was returned to a semblance of normalcy, the police officer left after leaving me his card to inform him of what I want to do with this after giving it some thought. The next day, I attended a meeting of the HOA to address the situation. During that meeting, I couldn't help but share my frustration and concern with the rest of the members. I stood up, taking a deep breath, and addressed the room. Hey everyone. I hope you don't mind me saying a few words here. I just wanted to talk about what happened with a pool party on my property while my family and I were away. It's not just about a fence and a party, it's about the fundamental principle of property rights and respect. I understand that the HOA aims to promote a sense of community and organize events, but that should never come at the cost of trampling over someone's property. When we leave our houses for a few days, we should feel confident that our homes and belongings are safe, not worried that someone else might swoop in and take over in the name of the HOA. Now, I'm not against community gatherings and having fun together. In fact, I encourage it. But imagine if any of you went on vacation and returned to find your home invaded, your belongings used without permission, and your property damaged. I bet you wouldn't be too thrilled about it either. I am not asking for special treatment, just basic respect. That's what a community should be built upon. Mutual respect and understanding. I hope we can all learn from this incident and ensure it never happens again. The room fell silent for a moment as my words sunk in. Some nodded in agreement while others looked contemplative. It was clear that my message had struck a chord with several members. As the HOA meeting continued, I felt the need to make an important announcement regarding the actions of my neighbor Dave. After talking with the police, it became evident that I have every right to pursue legal action against Dave for trespassing, destruction of property, and unauthorized use of my yard and pool. I just wanted you all to be aware of my intentions. Some members looked surprised, while others nodded in understanding. I wasn't one to take legal action lightly, but it had become clear that Dave needed to face some consequences. Dave, however, didn't take the news well. He jumped to his feet with a raging face. "You can't do that. Karen encouraged me to have the pool party. She told me it was a fantastic idea and that the HOA would support it." Karen's eyes widened in shock and she shook her head, clearly not expecting Dave to throw her under the bus. "Now hold on just a minute," she stammered, trying to maintain her composure. "I never encouraged you to do anything of the sort, Dave. You know very well that hosting a party on someone else's property without their consent is against the rules." Dave wasn't backing down though. "No, you're lying. You said it was a community event and that everyone would love it. You even said we could use Matt's pool in the yard for the party." I couldn't believe my ears. Dave was desperate and he was now trying to drag Karen down with him. But Karen surprised us all with her response. "I can assure you all that I never endorsed or encouraged Dave to throw a party on Matt's property. In fact, I explicitly told him that such actions were not allowed. This is a serious matter, and I won't stand for false accusations." The room fell silent once again as everyone processed what had just happened. Karen had just flipped the script on Dave, and he seemed to realize that his attempts to shift the blame weren't working. With a defeated expression, Dave slumped back into his chair, realizing that his plan had backfired spectacularly. The other members exchanged looks, and it was clear that they didn't trust Dave's version of events. I spoke up again, trying to diffuse the tension. Look, I don't want this to turn into a big confrontation, but I do want to hold Dave accountable for what he did. I'm not looking for revenge, I just want to protect my property and ensure that this doesn't happen again to me or anyone else. In the days that followed, I did proceed with pressing charges against Dave for the damage and trespassing. It wasn't about revenge, it was about standing up for my rights and the rights of the others in the community. I made sure to keep my neighbors informed about the progress of the legal proceedings, as transparency was crucial in rebuilding trust within the neighborhood. As time went on, it became apparent that Dave couldn't let go of the resentment he harbored towards Karen for turning on him during the HOA meeting. His misguided sense of retaliation led him down a dark path, one that would eventually be captured on surveillance cameras and escalate the tension within our community. One morning, it was discovered that Karen's car had its tire slashed by someone during night. As the news spread, it didn't take long for security footage from a nearby camera to surface. The recording revealed Dave skulking around the car, wearing a hoodie to obscure his identity, but he faced the camera way too many times to get a clear shot of his face. The evidence was undeniable. Upon seeing the surveillance footage, Karen's anger flared like a wildfire. She stormed to Dave's house and she confronted him in the front yard. "You've really done it this time, Dave," Karen shouted. "How could you betray me like this after everything?" Dave, caught off guard, tried to feign innocence, but the proof was right there on the footage. "I don't know what you're talking about, Karen. Whatever happened, it's not me." But Karen wasn't backing down. She pulled out her phone and called the cops on spot. As she waited for the call to connect, Dave's demeanor changed from denial to anger. "You're calling the cops on me? After all we've been through? I can't believe you turned on me like this, Karen." She says to the dispatcher, "I need the police to come to my house immediately. I've got someone vandalizing cars, and I believe he's the one responsible for my car's tire slashing." Karen kept her phone in hand, the call recording as evidence that she continued to face Dave. She knew she needed to keep her distance, so she maintained a safe distance while keeping an eye on him. Dave's anger seemed to escalate and he started screaming, "You're making a big mistake, Karen. I thought we were friends." Karen took a deep breath, trying to remain composed. "Friends don't slash each other's tires, Dave. This has gone too far. And I can't let you continue to come at me like that, and all for a freaking pool party." Within minutes, the police arrived at the scene and Karen pointed at the surveillance camera, showing the officers the incriminating footage of Dave vandalizing her car. The police acted swiftly, restraining Dave and reading him his rights. They gathered evidence from the scene and interviewed witnesses who had heard the confrontation. The incident involving Dave and the tire slashing led to a loss of trust in Karen among the community members. Many felt that her judgment was questionable and her position as the HOA president was no longer tenable. During an emergency meeting, the community members expressed their concerns and frustrations, and they kind of forced her to step down from the position of the HOA president. With Karen's resignation, the community had the opportunity to elect a new HOA president. Several members expressed interest in the position, but among the candidates, there was one neighbor, Mark, who stood out for his dedication to community service and his reputation for being fair and impartial. He emphasized the importance of transparency, open dialogue, and ensuring that everyone's voice was heard. After a thoughtful election process, Mark was elected as a new HOA president, and he accepted the role with humility. I'm sorry if my story was a little bit long, but I hope you got something good out of it. See you later.